Does it make you any less of a pro if you downsize from an iPad Pro to the latest iPad mini? Let's find out. Up until recently, my iPad of choice has been the 11-inch iPad Pro. It's got the awesome power of the M4 chip, an insanely bright, super responsive screen, and it's probably the fanciest iPad I've ever owned. But after half a year, I had my head turned when Apple released, at long last, a new generation of iPad mini. Well, I say new, it's practically the same iPad as its older sibling, but with a faster chip, Apple Pencil Pro compatibility, a faster USB port, and some enhanced storage options. In pretty much all of the ways, it's the same as the previous generation. And here's the thing, with both of these devices in my life, I feel like I'm in a kind of open marriage with my iPads. Anyway, I've realized a bunch of hard truths when it comes to why I tend to choose one iPad over the other. Here they are, in no particular order. First of all, despite experimenting with iPad polyamory, I've realised that I am, after all, a monogamous, one iPad kind of guy. Now, when you're thinking about having just one iPad in your setup, you need to take the rest of your devices into account because it's all about the big picture of what you need to get done and where. And there's this balancing act between portability, power, and productivity that is well worth bearing in mind. You see, most of my day-to-day work, including all the content for this channel, is done on my trusty MacBook Pro. It's the centre of my computing world, and on the occasions I've been out of the house without it, with just the iPad Pro and the iPad keyboard to contend with, the iPad hasn't been enough for me to get all my stuff done. And I've often found myself wishing that I brought my MacBook with me so that I can carry on working on that edit or get some multi-window productive work done nice and easily. And even though it's more weight in my backpack, I'm actually happy with the trade-off because I get this huge boost in my productivity. And that's partly because the software that runs iPads just isn't at the level where it can compete with full-blown Mac OS. At all. I mean, I can easily whip this out and take notes, sketch out designs and work on thumbnails, catch up with emails and watch Netflix when I'm done, but here's the kicker, I can do all of that on my iPad mini, and I don't even need a bag for this little thing. It literally fits in my coat pocket. So yeah, I think if I owned one of Apple's desktop computers like an iMac or one of the new Mac minis, I could probably justify the 11-inch iPad Pro as it would give me this extra portable setup to use whenever I needed it. But in my case, my MacBook takes care of that. So having this mega powerful keyboard-enabled tablet sat here in the middle of my setup, it kind of makes it obsolete. I want to use it more, but I prefer the mini size, and for everything else, my MacBook Pro is more than capable. Before we get into my other hard truths, if you're doing any drawing or note-taking on your iPad, there's something you'll want to do after getting it out of the box, and that is slap on a paper-like screen protector. If I can do this on my first attempt without making a terrible mess of it, trust me, you will be fine. They even give you a little video to follow and also include a second screen protector with each order, just in case you need it. Now, if you've been hiding under a rock and you haven't heard about paper yet, they make amazing screen protectors that help you take need to notes and draw more accurately by giving you this really thin layer of resistance between your iPad and your Apple Pencil. When I say thin, it's about the same thickness as a human hair. It does all this without sacrificing your screen clarity using these tiny nano dots which are designed to emulate the feeling of writing on paper. Now obviously it doesn't feel the same as paper because to do that you'd have to use an iPad like this, and then you look like a proper idiot. But if you've ever tried using an Apple Pencil on naked iPad glass, you'll know it's that sort of sensation that'll make you want to squish your face up. It doesn't feel nice at all. With a Paperlike, on the other hand, you get this kind of analog feedback that just feels so much better. Have a listen to this. These are available in over 150 countries for all the models of iPad, including this year's latest releases, and the new 2.1 edition of Paperlike is Swiss made, which means it also smells of rich, beautiful chocolate. Okay, that's a lie. It doesn't smell like chocolate, but it is made in Switzerland. Promise. And if you want to level up your digital note-taking even further, you can add on some other accessories like these custom Apple Pencil tips and this silicone grip, which just add that extra level of squishy comfort to your input when you're writing and drawing. If you like the look of these, you can get them in a funky little bundle using the link in my description or this code over here. Thank me later. Right. Back to some more hard truths. Another hard truth that I've realized after using Pro and Mini alongside each other is that the iPad Mini is really the only genuine iPad in the whole range. Let me explain. The fact that the Pro model has all this power under the hood and the lovely keyboard case, it kind of makes it feel like you're constantly within arm's reach of being able to do much more than it can actually do within the confines of iPadOS. It's a bit like having a speedboat in your back garden. It'd be great to take it out for a spin, but you've got to almost force the opportunity to make use of it because it just doesn't lend itself to a lot of regular scenarios. To take an example, you get the Stage Manager feature on the iPad Pro, which lets you keep a bunch of apps open simultaneously and then swap between them. It even works in full screen if you ever hook it up to a bigger monitor. But anyone who's ever tried to use this will know that it's really quite unwieldy and it doesn't really work in the same way as being able to have multiple apps open on a proper laptop computer. It's a good idea, terrible execution from Apple. In fact, it goes deeper than that. If I ever head out to a coffee shop with just my iPad mini, I can do so knowing full well that I'm not going to be doing anything related to typical productivity work. So I might use it for catching up on some content, as a perfect sized digital notebook, working on some light image editing, or maybe even a spot of micro gaming. It doesn't have Stage Manager and it looks absolutely awful if you hook it up to a big monitor, but the tablet mode is really all it needs to be. It's a palm-size content consumption beast, and it's the only iPad in Apple's current lineup that isn't trying to be anything more. And I kind of love that. Next up, let's talk about price. Like any average consumer, no, not that guy, I mean most average consumers, I don't have an unlimited budget. And that means I need to carefully weigh up the advantages of investing in any new tech. Now, in the case of the iPad Pro, that thing set me back over £1,000. If I'd gone really crazy on the spec and upgraded to the larger 13-inch model, I could have easily spent over £2,500, which is so much money for something that is essentially still a companion device. And you're also getting into the same price territory as some of the base MacBook Air models or even the latest MacBook Pros. And you've really got to need this particular form factor to drop that kind of money on an iPad. And spending that kind of money as a business investment always has me thinking, well, this thing has got to work hard to earn its place in my setup. In simple terms, it needs to help me make more money for my business than if I didn't buy it. About 6 months later, I can't really say it's done that. Yeah, I've been able to use it, but not on a daily basis. And even in this setup on my desk, it's a really expensive second screen that almost always runs as a companion to my MacBook rather than being the star of the show. The iPad mini, on the other hand, starts at $499. I think I paid $599 for my specific configuration. And the most you can spend, by the way, is $949 if you go for the cellular model with the highest level of storage. That's a drastically different level of investment. And to me, that means if I only ever use it in place of a real analog notebook or to read books on a train, or most likely as a way to catch up with YouTube, I can justify that in a much easier way. Next up, we need to talk about being a pro user. You know the funny thing about this iPad Pro? It's convinced me that I'm not a pro, which is utterly mad because I am a professional content creator. I'm exactly the sort of person who Apple thinks should own one of these. The problem is, as a pro, I need so much more from my iPad than even this one can give me. I never film videos like this. In fact, I'm pretty sure no one does. I don't use multicam using iPhones, and I already have an Apple keyboard and trackpad attached to my MacBook. If I was a pro by Apple standards, it feels like I should be seen in a coffee shop carefully colouring in a design sketch whilst then flicking over to edit some content in Final Cut Pro and then tapping out a new music track in Logic. Then maybe attach a keyboard and fire off some invoices. The problem is, and you might have spotted a pattern here, I can do all of those things on my iPad mini. Well, maybe not the email part, but add on a wireless keyboard like this one from Newfie with a little fold-out stand, and it's easier than you might think. Even something like Final Cut on an iPad mini for editing is actually pretty workable, especially for something like short-form content that doesn't require crazy color correction or motion graphics. It's a really nice way to quickly edit down some clips from a long-form video and get them posted without having to crank up my MacBook to get the job done. If you own this iPad Pro and you feel that there are things that you could only do on here that an iPad mini couldn't do, I am all ears. Let me know in the comments what you get up to with yours. Look, maybe you're watching this because you're thinking about buying a new iPad Pro or an iPad mini. Now, they couldn't be more different in terms of specs or pricing. So how on earth do you decide which is best for you? Well, for me, it kind of boils down to two questions. Firstly, do you absolutely need the crazy fast, crazy bright display that only comes with the iPad Pro? You will pay for it, but if you absolutely need something that's faster than 60Hz refresh rate and brighter than 500 nits, the iPad mini just isn't going to cut it for you. Neither is the iPad Air, for that matter. Now, I know the iPad mini screen is a deal breaker for some people, but if you're on the fence, I'd encourage you to try it out in your local Apple store. Now, in the flesh, it's nowhere near as bad as some people would have you believe. Secondly, maybe size matters. For me, it absolutely does. I've learned that I'd rather have an inferior, dimmer screen that lets me keep my device in my pocket rather than have all the power and might and promise of the iPad Pro that's just way too big for that. If you're a professional design artist, for instance, maybe you'll just need something that goes all the way up to this massive 13-inch display in the iPad Pro lineup, and the mini is just, well, too mini for you. As for me, I'm going to give it just a little bit longer before I make my mind up, but I'm feeling pretty tired of this thing sitting around gathering dust while I just feel guilty about not using it. I know the iPad mini wasn't the upgrade that people deserve this year, but in my case, it was the one that my setup needed. And once you've weighed up both of these, you might end up deciding that you'd actually be better off with a MacBook instead. Well, don't worry, I've got you covered with this video over here. See you next time, folks.